Oh my god, I missed this. Hey folks, let's get back into some classic PragerU antics, straight from the man himself.
There is a pandemic in the Western world, especially, but not only in America, that few are talking about, let alone addressing. This pandemic doesn't actually kill people, but it does ruin lives, crush families, and cause debilitating pain. Far more than most cases of COVID-19.
Okay, for those of you who want to participate, unfortunately you've probably already seen the title of this video, but if you've got a friend handy, I'd like for you to show them that clip and ask them what on earth they think this video is going to be about. Have you locked in your guesses? Alright, let's continue.
What pandemic am I talking about? The pandemic of people who do not speak to one or both of their parents.
Okay, I promise that I'm going to get to the contents of this video, but I seriously have to dwell on just how weird of an intro this is. Like, I don't know how to put it into words exactly. It's just, let me put it this way. There is a 9/11 happening every single day in the West, but especially in America, that few are willing to talk about. No, I'm not talking about hijacked airplanes crashing into buildings and killing thousands of people. I'm talking about the 9/11 that happens every single time a gay child refuses to talk to their homophobic parents. It may not be as flashy. Okay, let's cut that off there. In my defense, if you really think about it, what Dennis said was way worse. What were we talking about again?
There are three primary reasons. The first is the rise of the therapeutic mentality.
Right. So Prager's argument here is essentially that one of the reasons that some adults don't talk to their parents anymore is because therapists and mental health institutions have told them that they shouldn't if their parents are negatively affecting their mental health. Of course, if you've ever talked to a therapist, a decent one at least, they usually try to recommend ways to improve your relationship with your family before straight up telling you to cut them off. This, I would argue, is a good thing. There are times when people simply refuse to treat you like a decent human being, and I don't think that you as an adult should be expected to put yourself through that. Call me old-fashioned, but I thought we believed in personal responsibility here. If you treat the people in your life like garbage, you shouldn't be shocked when they stop calling. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking that, but luckily Dennis is here to expand on this point.
I'll use a family story to illustrate this point. Despite the fact that his mother was a very difficult woman, my father called her every night.
This probably isn't your first PragerU video, so I'll imagine you think you know where this is going, right? He's gonna give some cute, sappy little anecdote about a family overcoming adversity and realizing that they're better off for it. He'll heavily imply that most, if not all, relationships can be fixed this way, and move on, having proven with facts and logic that you shouldn't cut off difficult parents because one guy had a positive experience. But that's not quite what he does. Dennis kind of goes against the grain in an interesting way here. Let's listen.
My father called her every night, and every night she would yell at him. As a child, I heard this because instead of holding the phone to his ear, my father would periodically place the phone on the kitchen table.
Man, that's just depressing. Your grandmother was so abusive that you could hear her terrorizing your father over the phone as an impressionable child. That's not the own that you think it is. It mostly just makes me want to give you a hug until I remember those articles you wrote about how you treat your wife, and then magically the feeling disappears. I mean, you seriously intend to convince us that people should keep their abusive parents in their lives in the hope that one day they'll have a child who gets to experience that abuse secondhand? Shit, now I'm sad.
Had my father been born a generation later and told a therapist how much he dreaded calling his mother, the therapist would likely have led my father to believe there was no reason he should talk to her.
Yes, exactly. She's so cruel to you that your children are listening on in horror from the other room. If she won't stop doing that, stop calling her.
The therapist would have declared my grandmother toxic.
Because she is.
And given my father permission to avoid calling her.
But he didn't see a therapist, and his child grew up to be Dennis Prager. Low blow, I know. I'm right, but it's a low blow. Moving forward, I will try to be nicer to the guy who wrote, oh, Jesus Christ.
But my father lived in the age of shoulds. Moreover, he was a religious Jew who had been taught the 10 Commandments since childhood, The fifth of which is, honor your father and your mother. And he believed, as did most Americans, that the Ten Commandments were given by God.
All right, this is an incredibly important line, and I just want to take a moment to ponder exactly what it means. If truly honor thy father and mother is a commandment from God, then you have no right to give any sort of caveats. If this is really the standard you follow, there is no amount of abuse that justifies cutting your parents off. The fifth commandment doesn't say, honor your parents unless they really, really suck. No. Dennis is a divine command theorist. There's no way for him to weasel his way out of this. Put a pin in that.
A second reason for this pandemic is parental alienation. This is usually caused by one parent against the other during or after a divorce, frequently, though certainly not always, by the mother against the father.
Man literally couldn't go 3 minutes without making a dig at women. Not to blow your mind or anything, but this isn't really what the data suggests. No. What it shows is that the parent with custody is almost always the one responsible for alienation, which, obviously. But among parents with custody, there doesn't appear to be a gender bias. Of course, men more often lose custody of their children voluntarily, but that doesn't really feel like a women issue, not to let facts get in the way of a good narrative. Regardless, there is a salient concern here. Parental alienation is, without a doubt, a real problem, and while I'm sure that it does have a significant negative effect on the parent being alienated, I can imagine how profoundly that must hurt. This feels more at place in a video about child psychology and their well-being, because no matter what happens to the parent, they will always be the primary victim here. To use this as a point in your video about why people should maintain contact with their abusive parents just feels, weird? It's just there's not really any connection to any of your other points, and your other points are really obviously what this video's about.
The third reason for this pandemic is ideological.
All right, this one's a little bit harder to talk about because it really depends on context. Should you cut off your parents over petty disagreements? I was going to say probably not, but no, you shouldn't do that. The fact that your otherwise loving mother is not quite as hip with Twitter leftism as you are is not a good reason to end a relationship with one of the most important people in your life. That said, that's not really controversial, right? I think most people outside of some really niche circles agree that cutting off your parents for ridiculously petty reasons is both selfish and kind of cruel.
I suspect few people in previous generations encountered parents whose children didn't speak to them because of how the parent voted.
No. When Dennis says that it's bad to cut off your parents because of the way that they vote, he's constructing what I've decided to call a straw man. I don't know, I like the ring of it. A good number of adults have parents whose bigotry has completely consumed them. They can't bring their significant other around for dinner because their parents don't like their gender, or they're gonna get bombarded with racist bullshit. I've already mostly made this argument with respect to friendship in a previous video, so I'm gonna link that here and not belabor the point too much. What's important to us is that Dennis probably knows that he can't make a convincing argument against this, so instead he challenges a far easier opponent and pretends that the other one just doesn't exist.
For the record, I am not speaking about myself. My 2 sons and 2 stepsons and I speak frequently, love one another, and share values.
Hey, good for you, man. I'm pretty much in the same boat. I quite like my parents. I visit fairly often and call when I can. They're currently on a trip that I wasn't able to go to because I have work that I have to do, so my siblings are just photoshopping me into all of their family pictures. I've simply elected myself representative of those who don't talk to their parents because, as it turns out, the position didn't exist before, so I don't know. I thought I'd invent it, just for funsies. Anyhow, back to you, Dennis.
Yes, there are times when a parent is so abusive, pathological, or evil that communication becomes essentially impossible.
No, you don't get to say this. It's time to take that pin out from earlier. You told us that the command to honor your parents was given to us by God without qualification. You cannot come in here and start giving us qualifications. Dennis adds this caveat in here because obviously, he'd be laughed out of the room if he said the opposite, but he doesn't seem to realize this completely eradicates his religious justification for this argument. But you do have a couple more fun twists for us, so I'll let you continue.
And it is important to note, you do not have to love your parents. Just talk to them. Even the Bible, which commands people to love their neighbor, to love the stranger, and to love God, never commands us to love our parents.
I don't really have any commentary on this except to say that this is just kind of weird, isn't it? Like, just a strange little bit of hermeneutics that's not in here because it's essential to the argument, but kind of has to be here because they're trying to convince people to be nicer to their abusive parents. Well, their actual target audience is people who are mad that folks aren't nicer to their abusive parents and want validation for that, but you know what I mean.
Indeed, the infliction of such pain on a parent is about as great an act of cruelty as most people will ever inflict on another human being. If there is a God who gave the Ten Commandments, these people will be judged accordingly.
Good Lord, what a closer. Honestly, I kind of dig it. You spend the whole video trying to make arguments for your incredibly unconvincing opinion, and then you finish it off with a vague threat. Here, let me try. If you like this video, please consider liking and commenting. Share it with someone who might be interested. Subscribe for more. If you don't, he knows where you live.